I still remember the first time I met my dad's business partner in person, not just as a name I heard in passing over dinner conversations or on late-night phone calls I pretended not to listen to. It was a humid summer afternoon in Atlanta, the kind where the air feels thick enough to chew, and the pavement outside their office building shimmered like it was melting. My dad told me to come by after school because there was someone important he wanted me to meet, and I didn't think much of it at the time. I was 16, more focused on finishing my homework, getting my license, and figuring out how to stretch my part-time paycheck from the grocery store than anything my dad was doing with his business. My dad had always been a hard worker. That was the version of him I grew up with. Early mornings, late nights, always on the phone, always saying he was building something for us. I believed him. I really did. Even when he missed school events, even when he forgot birthdays, I told myself it was all part of some bigger plan that would eventually make sense. So when he told me about his business partner, a guy named Victor Hale, I pictured someone sharp, maybe a little intimidating, someone who matched my dad's seriousness. What I didn't expect was how easy Victor made everything feel. He met us in the lobby like we were old friends, mid-40s, clean cut, sleeves rolled just enough to look casual but intentional, the kind of guy who always looked like he was in control of every room he walked into. He shook my hand firmly, looked me in the eye, and smiled like he already knew my name better than I did. "So this is the famous kid," he said, like I was part of some story he'd already heard and liked. My dad laughed, but there was something relieved in it, like he was glad Victor approved of me. We went up to their office on the 12th floor. Glass walls, city skyline stretching out in every direction, polished floors that reflected the ceiling lights. Everything smelled expensive in a way I didn't know how to describe back then. Not perfume or cologne exactly, but ambition. That sharp, clean scent of money and pressure. They talked business for a while. Numbers, contracts, expansion plans. I mostly zoned out, scrolling on my phone, until Victor started asking me questions. Not the usual small talk stuff either. He asked what I wanted to do after high school, whether I liked working or preferred school, what I thought about building something from nothing. No adult had ever asked me anything like that before. I remember thinking he was different. Not in a dramatic way, just attentive, like I mattered in a conversation that wasn't even about me. When we left, my dad seemed lighter. I noticed it in the car right away. He was humming something under his breath, tapping the steering wheel, something he almost never did. "What do you think of him?" he asked. "Victor," I said. "He seems cool, I guess." My dad nodded like that answer meant more than it should have. Good, he's solid, been a real anchor for the company. I didn't know what that meant, but I remember deciding it was a good thing. Over the next few months, Victor started showing up more, not just at the office, but at dinners, sometimes even at our house. He never came empty-handed. A bottle of wine for my parents, expensive-looking desserts, once even a framed photograph of some city skyline he said reminded him of opportunity. My mom liked him immediately. She said he had presence, which I later learned was her way of saying she trusted people who looked like they belonged. Victor would ask about my school, my friends, my plans. He never pushed too hard, but he always listened like what I said mattered. My dad, on the other hand, started working even more. If anything, Victor seemed to take some of the weight off him. That's what everyone said. That's my mom said. Even my dad said it, like he needed to convince himself. "He's helping me scale things," my dad told me one night when I found him still awake at 2 a.m. in the kitchen. "I don't know how I would have done this without him." I remember leaning against the counter, watching him stare at spreadsheets on his laptop like they were the only thing holding our lives together. "Do you trust him?" I asked. My dad didn't even look up. "I have to." That answer stuck with me more than I realized at the time. Victor started giving me attention in ways that felt personal but not inappropriate. He'd remember small details I mentioned weeks earlier. Like when I said I wanted to get a used car instead of something new, he brought me a list of reliable models that won't drain your wallet. When I said I was thinking about community college first, he didn't laugh or dismiss it like some adults did. He nodded like it made sense. "You've got a practical head on your shoulders," he told me once, sitting across from me at our kitchen table while my parents were out. "That's rare. Most people your age are chasing noise." I didn't know why, but I liked the way that made me feel. There was one night that stands out more than anything else from that time. My dad had to fly out for a last-minute meeting in Chicago. My mom was working late at the hospital. Victor came by to drop off some documents, he said. It was raining outside, one of those slow, steady southern rains that makes everything feel quieter than it should. We ended up talking for hours, not about business, not about my dad, just life. He told me about how he started from nothing, how people underestimated him, how he learned early that loyalty is rare, but power is everywhere. I didn't fully understand what he meant, but I remember nodding like I did. He had a way of speaking that made you feel like you were being let in on something important. At one point, I asked him if it was hard working with my dad. He paused for a second too long. Then he smiled. "Your dad is a good man, just sometimes good men get overwhelmed." I remember that sentence exactly because of the way he said it, like it was a compliment wrapped around something heavier.
After he left that night, I stayed up thinking about it, about how adults always seemed to be playing a game I couldn't see the rules to yet. Things changed slowly after that, almost invisibly. My dad started traveling more. Victor started filling in more gaps. Decisions that used to take my dad days were suddenly handled. Money seemed less stressful in conversations at home. My parents argued less, but the house also felt quieter in a way I couldn't explain. Victor and I kept talking whenever he was around. Sometimes it felt like he understood me better than my own dad did. Not in a comforting way, but in a precise way, like he knew how to aim his words so they landed exactly where I was vulnerable. Still, I never thought anything was wrong. If anything, I thought things were getting better. Until the night I walked into my dad's office unannounced. I wasn't supposed to be there. I had forgotten my laptop charger, and I knew my dad kept a spare in his desk drawer. The building was mostly empty that evening, just the hum of air conditioning and the distant sound of traffic outside. The office door was slightly open. I remember pushing it just a little wider, expecting to see an empty room. Instead, I heard Victor's voice. He wasn't alone, and the way he was speaking made my stomach drop before I even understood why.
I froze in the doorway, my hand still on the handle, my dad's name half formed in my throat, but nothing came out. Because in that moment, I realized this wasn't just a conversation I wasn't supposed to hear. It was something that had been going on without me seeing it at all, and it had everything to do with my family. I just didn't know how yet. I stood there in the doorway longer than I should have, like my body forgot how to move forward or backward. The office lights were still on, but they felt harsher than usual, like they were exposing something instead of just illuminating it. My dad's desk was angled slightly toward the glass wall, city lights bleeding in behind it, and Victor was standing near the window with his back half turned to me, one hand in his pocket like he owned the space more than my dad ever did. My dad was sitting behind the desk, but he didn't look like he usually did when he worked late. He looked tense in a way I wasn't used to seeing. Shoulders tight, jaw set, eyes locked on Victor instead of the papers in front of him. I remember thinking maybe I should just back out quietly, pretend I never came in. But then I heard Victor say my name. Not casually, not like he was talking about me in passing. He said it like I was part of something already in motion. "You're overthinking it," Victor was saying. His voice was calm, almost soothing, like he was talking someone down from a ledge. "It's already structured in a way that protects all of us, especially your family." My dad rubbed his forehead like he was trying to hold his thoughts in place. "Protects us," he repeated, but it didn't sound like agreement. It sounded like doubt he didn't want to say out loud. Victor turned slightly, just enough that I could see his face now. That same composed expression he always wore, but there was something sharper behind it, something I had never noticed before. "It's simple," Victor continued. "We redirect, stabilize the reporting, and delay exposure until Q4. By then, everything recalibrates. No one gets hurt if no one panics." I didn't understand half of what he was saying. Redirect, reporting, Q4. It sounded like grown-up language meant to blur meaning instead of reveal it. But I understood my dad's silence. He wasn't interrupting. He wasn't pushing back. He was listening. That was the part that made my stomach tighten. My dad finally spoke, but his voice was lower than usual. "And if it doesn't hold?" Victor exhaled like the question was almost annoying. "Then we manage it the way we always manage it," he said. "Controlled exposure, strategic distancing. You know this." There was a pause after that, a long one. I shifted slightly in the doorway, and the floor creaked under me. Both of them turned at the same time. For a split second, everything froze. My dad's eyes widened slightly, like he wasn't expecting me there at all. Victor's expression didn't change much, but something in it recalculated fast, like a system adjusting to a new variable. "Hey," I said, because my brain couldn't think of anything else. My dad stood up too quickly. "What are you doing here?" I lifted the charger in my hand like it explained everything. "I forgot this, my laptop." My voice trailed off because I could feel it. The tension in the room wasn't normal. It wasn't just work stress. It felt heavier than that, like I had walked into something that had already been decided without me. Victor smiled gently, like nothing had happened. "We were just finishing up," he said. But my dad didn't move. He was still watching me like he was trying to decide what I had heard. That silence did more damage than anything Victor said. "I didn't mean to interrupt," I added quickly. My dad shook his head. "No, it's fine. We were just discussing timing on some filings." Filing. That word sounded safer than everything else I'd heard in the last minute. Victor stepped forward slightly. "You should head home," he said, not unkindly. "Long day, school tomorrow." It should have sounded normal. It should have sounded like the same Victor who brought desserts to dinner and asked about my future. But now it just sounded like dismissal. I nodded because I didn't know what else to do. My dad walked me out himself, which he never really did when I came by the office. Usually he'd just tell me to grab what I needed and leave on my own. But this time he followed me into the hallway, his hand briefly touching my shoulder like he was making sure I stayed close. When the elevator doors closed, I finally looked at him. "Is everything okay?" I asked. He hesitated. That hesitation again.
Then he forced a small smile. "Yeah, just business stuff. Nothing for you to worry about." That phrase, "nothing for you to worry about," I had heard it my whole life, but this time it didn't land the same. When I got home, the house was dark except for the kitchen light. My mom still wasn't back from the hospital. I went straight to my room, but I didn't open my laptop. I just sat on the edge of my bed, staring at nothing, replaying fragments of the conversation I wasn't supposed to hear. Redirect, reporting, controlled exposure. It sounded like hiding something, not building something. And the worst part was how normal my dad had looked sitting there while it was being said. That night, I couldn't sleep. Every time I closed my eyes, I kept seeing Victor standing by the window like he belonged there more than anyone else. Like he wasn't just part of my dad's business, but part of the structure holding it up. Over the next few weeks, I started noticing things I had missed before. Small things at first. Phone calls that stopped when I entered the room. Conversations that shifted topics mid-sentence. My dad's laptop always angled slightly away from view when I walked behind him. Victor showing up less at our house, but texting my dad constantly. Then came the changes in mood. My dad started getting quieter again, like he used to be before Victor came into our lives. But this quiet wasn't peaceful. It was strained, like he was carrying something heavy and trying not to drop it. My mom noticed it too. One night at dinner, she asked him directly. "You're working yourself into the ground again," she said, pushing food around her plate without eating much. "Is this about Victor's deal falling through or something?" My dad looked up sharply. "It's not falling through." My mom frowned. "Then why do you look like you're waiting for something to collapse?" My fork stopped halfway to my mouth. My dad didn't answer right away. He just stared at her for a second too long, then looked away. "It's complicated," he finally said. That word again, complicated. It was starting to feel like the most dangerous word in our house. After dinner, I overheard them arguing in the kitchen when they thought I was upstairs. My mom's voice was sharper than usual. "You said he was helping you. Now you're acting like you don't even trust him." My dad's response was lower, controlled. "I do trust him. That's the problem." I pressed myself against the wall at the top of the stairs, listening without meaning to. My mom sighed. "Then what is it?" A long pause followed. Then my dad said something that I didn't fully understand at the time, but I felt it anyway. "He knows too much." Silence again. Then my mom, quieter now. "About what?" My dad didn't answer. That night, I couldn't stop thinking about those words. He knows too much. About what?
The next time I saw Victor was at a restaurant downtown. He was sitting alone in a booth near the back when I walked in with a friend after school. He saw me immediately and waved us over like it was the most natural thing in the world. My friend looked impressed. "That your dad's business guy?" he asked. I nodded. Victor stood when we approached, shaking my friend's hand first, then mine. "You're getting taller," he said to me, like we were family catching up after a long time. He bought us food without asking, asked about school again, made jokes that landed just right. To anyone watching, it would have looked completely normal. But I couldn't shake the feeling that I was sitting across from someone I didn't understand anymore. At one point, my friend got distracted scrolling on his phone, and Victor leaned slightly closer to me. "Your dad's been under a lot of pressure," he said casually. I nodded slowly. Victor watched me for a second. People react differently under pressure. Some collapse, some adapt. Your dad, he's still deciding which one he wants to be. Something about the way he said it made my skin tighten. "What does that mean?" I asked. Victor smiled faintly. "It means you should trust what you see, not what you're told." Then he stood up like the conversation was over. That sentence stayed in my head longer than anything else he had ever said. Trust what you see. Because what I was seeing didn't make sense anymore. And I had a feeling I was getting closer to something my dad had been trying very hard to keep away from me. That night, I made a decision I didn't fully understand yet. I was going to find out what Victor Hale was really doing with my father, no matter what it cost me. I started paying attention to everything after that night. Not in a dramatic, movie-style way where suddenly everything clicks and the truth is obvious. It was slower than that, messier, like trying to assemble a picture while half the pieces are still hidden. At school, I couldn't focus. Teachers talked and I heard them, but nothing stuck. At home, I started watching my dad differently. Not because I thought he was lying about everything, but because I wasn't sure what parts of his life were real anymore. That feeling is hard to explain unless you've lived it. Like the ground under your normal life has a seam running through it, and once you notice it, you can't unsee it. Victor's words kept repeating in my head. Trust what you see. The problem was, I didn't trust what I was seeing anymore. My dad still acted like my dad. He still asked about school sometimes, still made coffee too strong in the mornings and forgot where he left his keys. But there were gaps now, moments where he would go quiet mid-conversation, like his mind was somewhere else entirely. Phone calls he took outside. Meetings that lasted longer than he explained. A tiredness in his face that didn't feel like just work. And Victor,
Victor had changed in my mind completely. The version of him that smiled at dinner tables and asked about my future didn't match the version I overheard in that office anymore. I couldn't reconcile the two, and that made every interaction with him feel like I was talking to someone wearing a mask I couldn't quite see through yet. I started doing something I didn't tell anyone about. I started paying attention to patterns. When Victor came around, my dad got more guarded. When Victor was away, my dad seemed almost relieved, even if only slightly. When my mom mentioned Victor directly, my dad's answers got shorter, controlled, like every word had been weighed before leaving his mouth. One night, I stayed up late pretending to be asleep when my dad got home. I heard him in the kitchen downstairs, moving slowly, like he didn't want to make noise. Then I heard the refrigerator open, the low hum of it filling the silence. And then his phone buzzed. I didn't hear the full conversation, just fragments through the floorboards in the quiet house. "We need to be careful," my dad's voice. A pause. "No," I said, careful, not delayed. Another pause. Then his voice dropped even lower. "If Victor pushes that, it's going to expose everything." My heart started beating harder without me realizing it. Everything. That word again. Big, vague, terrifying. I didn't sleep that night. The next morning, I did something I had never done before. I told my mom I was going to school, but instead I waited until she left for work, and then went straight to my dad's office looking. I don't know what I thought I would find. That's the honest truth. I wasn't some genius investigator. I was just a kid who couldn't stop thinking about something that didn't make sense anymore. The lobby security let me in because they knew me. I'd been there enough times before that nobody questioned it. That was the strange part. I already belonged in that building, even if I didn't understand why anymore. My dad's assistant wasn't at the desk when I got upstairs. The office was quieter than usual, almost empty, which made every sound feel louder. My footsteps on the polished floor, the faint hum of computers left running overnight, the city outside the glass walls moving like nothing underneath it was changing. My dad's office door was closed. I should have left. Instead, I heard voices inside. I froze just outside the door. Victor was there again. I recognized his voice immediately now, like a warning system my brain had built without permission. "I'm not asking for permission anymore," Victor said. My dad responded quickly, too quickly. "That's not what we agreed on." A short laugh from Victor, but there was no humor in it. "We didn't agree on anything. You agreed to trust me. There's a difference." Silence. Then my dad. "You're moving too fast." Victor's voice lowered slightly. "No, you're just realizing how slow you've been." I pressed my back against the wall outside the office, my hands suddenly cold. I should have walked away. I knew that. Every rational part of me was screaming at me to leave, but something kept me there. Something that felt less like curiosity and more like fear that already had me in its grip. My dad spoke again, and this time his voice wasn't just tired, it was strained. "If this comes out, it's not just the company, it's everything." Victor didn't respond immediately. I could imagine him standing there, calm as always, thinking before speaking, like every word was part of a plan. Finally, he said, "Then you should have thought about that before you started letting things slip." My stomach tightened. Letting things slip. My dad let out a breath that sounded like frustration mixed with something heavier. "You said this would stabilize everything," my dad said. "You said no one would get hurt." Victor's response came instantly. "No one gets hurt if everyone does what they're supposed to do." That line stayed with me more than anything else. I heard movement inside. Chairs shifting, papers maybe being touched, though I couldn't be sure. Then my dad said something that made my entire body go still. "You're involving my son too much in this." A pause. My heart dropped before I even heard Victor respond. When he did, his voice was quieter, more deliberate. "I'm not involving him. I'm observing him." That sentence didn't make sense at first. My brain tried to reject it, like it didn't belong in reality. My dad's voice sharpened. "He's not part of your leverage." And
Victor finally sounded slightly irritated, like my dad was missing something obvious. "He already is," Victor said. "He just doesn't know it yet." My breathing stopped for a second. I backed away from the door without thinking. My foot hit the edge of the wall too hard and made a small sound I couldn't take back. The conversation inside stopped instantly. "Did you hear that?" my dad said. I didn't wait. I turned and walked fast, then faster, then almost running down the hallway. My pulse was so loud in my ears I couldn't tell if they were following me or if I was imagining it. I didn't stop until I was in the elevator. Even then, I didn't breathe normally until the doors closed. In the parking lot, I sat in my car for a long time without starting it. My hands were shaking slightly on the steering wheel, and I kept replaying the words over and over again. Observing him. He already is leverage. I didn't know what that meant. Not fully, but I understood enough to feel sick about it. That night at home, I avoided everyone. I said I had homework. I stayed in my room with the door locked, staring at my phone, trying to convince myself I had misunderstood something. But then my phone buzzed. Unknown number. I almost didn't answer it. When I did, I heard silence first. Then Victor's voice. Calm. Familiar.
like nothing had happened. "You shouldn't have come by the office today." My entire body went cold. I didn't respond. He continued anyway. "I know you're trying to understand things you weren't meant to hear yet," he said, "but you're going to make it harder for your dad if you keep inserting yourself." My throat felt tight. "What are you talking about?" A pause. Then Victor said something I'll never forget. "Your dad is trying to protect what's left. I'm trying to keep it from collapsing entirely. And right now, you're standing too close to the fault line." I didn't even realize I was gripping my phone too hard until my hand started to hurt. "You're threatening me?" I asked, my voice lower than I expected. Victor actually sounded almost amused. "No," he said. "I'm warning you. There's a difference." Then he paused again, like he was deciding whether to say the next part. When he did, his voice softened slightly. "You trust me more than you trust your father. That's been true for a while now. You just haven't admitted it to yourself yet." I felt something inside me twist at that, because part of me hated that he might be right, and another part of me hated that I couldn't immediately say he was wrong. Before I could respond, the call ended. Just like that. No goodbye, no explanation, just silence. I sat there in my room for a long time after that, phone still in my hand, staring at nothing. And for the first time since all of this started, I realized something I didn't want to admit. This wasn't just about my dad's business anymore. It felt like I had already been pulled into something I didn't agree to be part of, and I had no idea how to get out of it. The next morning, I woke up like I hadn't slept at all. It wasn't just tiredness. It was that heavy, sinking feeling where your body is awake, but your mind is still stuck somewhere between what you know and what you wish you didn't. I stared at my ceiling for a long time before I even reached for my phone, half expecting another call from Victor, half hoping it was all some kind of misunderstanding my brain had blown out of proportion. But there was nothing. No missed calls, no messages, just silence that felt too intentional. At breakfast, my mom acted normal, too normal. She asked me about school, about homework, about whether I was eating enough. My dad barely spoke. He sat at the table like he was physically present but mentally somewhere else, stirring his coffee even after it was already dissolved, eyes fixed on nothing in particular. I kept waiting for someone to say something about last night, about Victor, about anything. No one did. That silence was worse than confrontation. By the time I left for school, I already knew I wasn't going. I drove to the office building again. I told myself I didn't have a plan, that I was just going to figure out what was going on. But that wasn't true anymore. Something inside me had shifted after that phone call. It wasn't curiosity driving me now. It was the need to understand before I got swallowed by whatever this was. The parking lot was half full when I arrived. Normal business day. People in suits walking quickly, phones pressed to ears, coffee cups in hand. Everything looked ordinary from the outside. That was the part that messed with my head the most. Nothing looked like what I felt inside. I took the elevator up without thinking too hard about it. My hands weren't shaking anymore. It was like my body had gone past fear and landed somewhere numb. When I stepped out onto my dad's floor, I immediately knew something was different. There were more people than usual. 2 men in suits I didn't recognize stood near the reception area. Not employees, not assistants. Something about the way they watched the room held off, controlled, observing instead of working. My steps slowed. I saw my dad's office door already open, and Victor was standing inside. But this time he wasn't alone with my dad. My dad was there, yes, but he wasn't sitting behind the desk. He was standing near the window, arms crossed, jaw tight. And in front of him, sitting in one of the guest chairs, was someone else entirely, a man I had never seen before. The moment I appeared in the doorway, everything in the room shifted. My dad's eyes snapped to me instantly. Victor turned his head slowly, like he already knew I would show up. The unknown man didn't react much at all, just glanced at me once, then back to the papers in his hands. My dad spoke first. "You weren't supposed to be here." I almost laughed at that. Almost. "Yeah," I said. I'm starting to hear that a lot lately. Victor's expression didn't change, but I noticed something in his posture tighten slightly, like he was recalculating again. My dad stepped forward. "Go home." But his voice wasn't just firm. It was strained, like he was trying to sound in control and failing slightly. I didn't move. Instead, I looked at Victor. "You called me last night." The room went quiet in a way that felt immediate and heavy. Victor didn't deny it. "That wasn't a conversation for you," he said calmly. Something in me snapped at that. "Nothing in this building is a conversation for me until I'm in it," I shot back before I could stop myself. My dad exhaled sharply like he was trying to contain the situation. The unknown man finally spoke, voice flat, professional. "We're running out of time," he said, not looking at me. "Either we stabilize this internally or it becomes external." That sentence hit differently than anything else I had heard so far. My dad's shoulders tensed. Victor, however, looked almost satisfied, like this was confirmation of something. I turned to my dad. "What is going on?" For a second, he didn't answer. Then he did something I wasn't expecting. He looked tired. Not angry, not defensive. Just tired in a way that felt deeper than sleep deprivation. "You shouldn't have been pulled into this," he said quietly. Victor let out a small breath, almost like a laugh. "He was already in it," Victor said. You just didn't control the angle. My dad shot him a look. Stop talking about him like that.
Victor finally turned fully toward my dad. "There it is," he said. "That's the problem. You keep thinking you can separate the personal from the structure. That's why this is collapsing." I felt like I was standing in the middle of something I still didn't fully understand, but I could feel the shape of it now. My dad straightened slightly. "You're the one who created the exposure risk." Victor nodded slowly, like he accepted the accusation without caring about it. "Because I adapted," he said. "You hesitated." The unknown man cleared his throat slightly. "This needs to be resolved now." My dad looked at me then. Really looked at me. And what I saw in his face wasn't confusion anymore. It was decision. "Go sit down," my dad said. I didn't move, but I didn't leave either. Then he said something that changed the entire room. "Victor has been moving money through side structures for months," my dad said flatly. The words didn't land immediately. It took a second for my brain to catch up. Victor didn't react at first. Then he smiled faintly. My dad continued. "Not just company funds. External accounts. Reclassification loops. He built it in layers so it wouldn't show up in standard audits." I looked at Victor. He didn't deny it. That alone made my stomach drop. The unknown man nodded slightly, like this was already confirmed information. My dad's voice stayed steady. But there was something underneath it now. Something like anger held down by exhaustion. And when I started catching it, my dad said, he started tightening control, using pressure points, internal access, and people close to me. My chest tightened slightly. Victor finally spoke, calm as ever. "You make it sound personal," he said. My dad turned toward him fully now. "It is personal." A pause. Then my dad said something I didn't expect. "He's been using my son as leverage." My body went cold. Victor tilted his head slightly. "That's not accurate." My dad stepped forward. "You told him things on purpose. You shaped his perception. You positioned yourself as the alternative authority in his life." Victor's expression shifted slightly for the first time. Not guilt. Not anger. Something closer to annoyance. "I gave him perspective," Victor said. "Something you weren't present enough to provide." That sentence hit harder than anything else. My dad's voice dropped. "You used my absence." Victor didn't deny it. The silence after that felt different. Heavier. The unknown man stood up. "This is no longer internal." My dad nodded once, like he had already accepted that. And then everything moved fast. Victor reached into his pocket slowly. Not threatening, just deliberate. "I tried to keep this from escalating," he said quietly. "Both of you refused balance." My dad didn't move. Neither did I. But for the first time, I realized something that made my stomach twist in a different way. My dad wasn't surprised. He knew more than he had been saying. Victor continued, looking at my dad now instead of me. "You think I exposed you," he said. "But you exposed yourself the moment you started hiding from your own decisions." My jaw tightened. Then he said something low enough that only I heard clearly. "I didn't hide everything." That was the moment everything stopped feeling like a simple betrayal story. Victor paused. The unknown man looked between them now, sensing something shifting. My dad finally turned to me fully now, and his voice changed. Not softer, not gentler, just honest in a way I had never heard before. "I didn't tell you because I didn't want you to become part of it," he said. I felt my throat tighten. Part of what? My dad hesitated. Then he said it. Victor didn't build this alone. Silence. My mind tried to reject it immediately. But Victor didn't interrupt. He just stood there, watching my dad now like he was letting him finish.
My dad continued. I let him think I was weaker than I was. My dad said, because I needed him to underestimate what I was preparing. I felt like the ground shifted slightly under me. Victor finally spoke. Quieter now. So that's your move, he said. You've been setting the board too. My dad nodded once. And that's when I understood something I didn't want to understand. This wasn't just manipulation from one side. It wasn't just betrayal. It was two people who had been building something together that stopped being controllable a long time ago. And I had been standing in the middle of it thinking I was just the observer. My dad looked at me one more time. And this time his voice wasn't asking for understanding. It was asking for something heavier. Go home, he said again. Before this closes in further. Victor didn't stop him. The unknown man didn't stop him. But I didn't move. Because for the first time, I realized leaving wouldn't undo the fact that I already knew. And whatever came next, I wasn't outside of it anymore.